Short story called Baji or Hercules by Mustafa Sajjad Haider, a piece that starts with a near-dead chick rescued from the trash and ends with a gut-wrenching culinary betrayal.
It's a really fascinating piece of Urdu flash fiction, or afsanka. It perfectly captures that specific boyhood obsession with raising a tough pet, only to have the adult world crash down on it in the most domestic way possible.
Right, so let's break down the plot first. The narrator finds this half-dead chick that couldn't even break out of its shell properly, tossed in the garbage.
Yes, he rescues it, nurses it back to health by feeding it by hand, and it eventually grows into this massive, powerful rooster. He names it Hercules after seeing the bodybuilder Steve Reeves in a movie.
And Hercules becomes a local legend, beating up other roosters, winning fights. The narrator is incredibly proud. But then, Hercules goes missing.
He goes to visit his older sister, Baji, who has moved to Wadat colony after getting married. She serves him a delicious chicken curry, he praises it, and then she drops the bomb. He just ate Hercules.
It's so brutal. He's literally licking his fingers, and then he finds out he's eating his best friend. What do you think Haider is trying to say here about power dynamics or growing up?
I think it's fundamentally about the loss of childhood innocence and how the adult world, represented by the older sister, views things with cold utility. To the boy, Hercules is a companion and a champion. To Baji, it's just a chicken that can feed her family.
And there's this irony that he names the rooster after a Greek demigod known for his strength, but in the end, that strength means nothing against a cooking pot. It's a reminder of human dominance over nature.
Exactly. The boy played God by saving it from the trash, and the sister played God by slaughtering it. It's a cyclical, almost tragic arc compressed into a very short narrative.
It really makes you think about how we categorize animals as pets versus livestock, and how quickly those lines can blur depending on who is making the decision.
Baji or Hercules is a short story that opens on a literal rubbish heap where a tiny, half-dead chick is discovered inside a broken eggshell. Most people would have walked past, but the narrator sees a flicker of movement and decides to intervene, setting off a chain of events that transforms this fragile creature into a neighborhood legend. It's a classic underdog story on the surface, but it ends with one of the most jarring, emotionally heavy twists in modern Urdu short fiction. Mustafa Sajjad Haider uses this small domestic setting to explore a massive divide between how we value life and how we define attachment versus utility.
The opening is really the anchor for the whole piece because it establishes the debt. This chick shouldn't have lived. In poultry farming, especially in rural or traditional settings in Pakistan, birds that can't break their own shells are often viewed as too weak to survive. They're nature's write-offs. By manually peeling away the remaining shell, the narrator essentially plays God. He interrupts the natural order to give this creature a second chance. That personal investment is why the ending feels like such a betrayal, not just of a pet, but of a creative act. He created the life of Hercules through his own labor.
And the name Hercules isn't just a random choice. It's a deliberate reference to the 1958 film starring Steve Reeves, which the narrator mentions watching. That film was a huge cultural touchstone, portraying Hercules as this unstoppable force of nature. By naming a puny, shivering chick after a demigod, there's this wonderful irony that slowly turns into literal truth. We see the bird go from being bullied by its siblings to becoming the champion of the neighborhood. It's a physical transformation that mirrors the narrator's growing pride.
That transformation is technically fascinating. The author describes the transition into an aseal rooster. For those who aren't familiar, a seal is a breed known for its incredible stamina and fighting spirit. In South Asian culture, particularly in Punjab, raising aseal roosters is a serious craft. They aren't just livestock, they're athletes. The detail of the neighborhood hens circling him and the rival roosters feeling dishonored reflects a very real social hierarchy in these villages and suburbs. Hercules wasn't just a bird anymore. He was a status symbol. He was the protector of the narrator's ego.
There's a specific scene where Hercules fights the champion of the neighborhood on a wall. The narrator considers intervening to save his bird, but decides to let him prove himself. It's a high-stakes moment where the bird earns his name. When Hercules wins and then jumps down to the narrator to be petted like a Khalifa or a wrestling coach, the bond is sealed. He's treated like a person, a friend. But that's where the tension starts, right? Because while the narrator sees a friend, the rest of the family still sees a rooster.
That's the fundamental conflict. In many Pakistani households, especially in that era, the line between pet and livestock is incredibly thin. You might feed a goat for months, give it a name, and then it's sacrificed for Eid. There's a pragmatic detachment that the older generation often maintains. The sister, Baji, lives in Wadat colony, which, if you know Lahore, suggests a certain middle-class domesticity. To her, a large, healthy asil rooster is simply a high-quality ingredient for a family meal. She isn't being cruel, she's being a good host. In her mind, she's honoring her brother by cooking the best bird available.
But isn't there something darker there? The narrator is invited over specifically to eat. He's told to enjoy the meal. He even compliments the taste. The betrayal is revealed only after he's already consumed part of his friend. It's a classic literary trope, the Thyestean feast, where someone unknowingly eats something they love. It turns the act of nourishment into an act of desecration. The sister's smile when she asks, "How was the curry?" feels almost sinister in hindsight, even if her intentions were innocent.
It's the banality of the revelation that makes it so sharp. She doesn't deliver it as an insult. She says it with a smile, likely expecting him to be impressed that she went to the trouble of preparing such a grand bird. This speaks to a massive generational and emotional gap. The narrator has invested years of care, feeding him by hand, putting him under the basket every night, while the family sees that same care as just fattening up the bird for the table. It's a total breakdown in communication regarding what value means.
I want to challenge the idea that Baji is entirely innocent here. She knew how much he loved that bird. The story mentions a conspiracy where the bird's disappearance was kept quiet. The parents and siblings all claim they don't know where Hercules went. They literally gaslight him so they can eat the pet. That adds a layer of familial betrayal that goes beyond just different perspectives. It feels like they wanted to put an end to his obsession with this bird and decided the dinner table was the most efficient way to do it.
That's a very valid reading. If we look at it through that lens, the act of cooking Hercules becomes a corrective measure. They're forcing the narrator to grow up and accept the reality of their world. In rural economies, keeping a champion rooster that you refuse to sell or fight for money, as the narrator mentions rejecting wrestling invitations, might be seen as a waste of resources. By eating him, they reclaim that resource. It's a violent way of reestablishing the traditional order of things. A rooster is for eating, not for loving.
And the final image is so haunting. The narrator doesn't scream. He doesn't throw the plate. He just bows his head and his tears fall into the very plate containing the remains of Hercules. It's an incredibly quiet, dignified grief. It reminds me of the rooster coop metaphor from Arundhati Roy or Aravind Adiga, this idea of being trapped in a cycle where even your successes are eventually consumed by the system. Hercules escaped the rubbish heap only to end up in a korma.
It also touches on the concept of afsanka as a genre. In Urdu literature, an afsanka is a very short story, microfiction, that relies on a punch at the end. Writers like Saadat Hasan Manto were masters of this. They take a mundane situation and peel back one layer to reveal a raw, often painful truth. Mustafa Sajjad Haider is doing exactly that here. He spends the first 80% of the story building a myth and the last 20% destroying it. The brevity of the form mirrors the suddenness of the loss. One minute you're a champion, the next you're a menu item.
Let's talk about the cultural symbolism of the rooster in South Asia. Beyond just being a bird, the rooster is often a symbol of masculinity and pride. In some folk traditions, it's a protector against evil spirits because it heralds the light. By killing Hercules, the family isn't just killing a bird, they're symbolically killing the narrator's pride and his sense of agency. He was the one who raised a champion. By eating the champion, they remind him that they are the ones in control.
There's also the irony of the narrator's own participation. He eats the food. He enjoys it. He says it's delicious. This is the ultimate tragedy of the story. He is complicit in the destruction of his own joy. It raises this uncomfortable question. How much of our own treasures do we unknowingly consume because we trust the people around us? It's a story about the fragility of trust in a domestic setting.
I've noticed that in the text, the narrator says he was like a Khalifa sitting outside the arena after the big fight. For our listeners, a Khalifa is a mentor or a master, usually in the context of Pelwani or traditional wrestling. It's a role of high honor. He transitioned from being the bird's savior to being its mentor. This makes the sister's act of servitude, cooking for him, even more ironic. She's performing a traditional female role of nurturing him, but she's doing it by destroying the thing he nurtured.
Exactly. It's a clash of two different types of care. The narrator's care was individualistic and emotional. The sister's care was collective and practical. In a traditional household, the collective usually wins, but the cost is the individual's spirit. The tears in the plate signify that while his body is being fed, his soul is being starved. It's such a powerful way to end a story that started with so much hope on a trash pile.
What do you think the takeaway is for a modern reader? Is it just a sad story about a pet? Or is it a warning about how we treat the things other people value? Today we talk a lot about empathy and personal boundaries, concepts that didn't really have these names in the setting of this story. Baji and the family completely violated the narrator's emotional boundaries, but in their cultural context, they probably thought they were doing him a favor by giving him a good meal.
I think the takeaway is the danger of objective value versus subjective value. To the world, Hercules was a rooster. To the narrator, Hercules was a miracle. When we treat things only by their objective utility, as meat, as a tool, as a commodity, we risk committing these small, everyday atrocities. The story forces us to look at the trash we ignore and the meat we eat and ask what stories we might be cutting short. It's a plea for a more compassionate way of seeing the world, one that recognizes that even a half-dead chick in a broken shell can be a Hercules if someone cares enough to look.
It's a masterclass in how to use a very small, specific anecdote to talk about the universal human experience of loss and the crushing weight of reality. The way the narrator's innocence is stripped away in a single sentence from his sister is something that stays with you long after you finish reading. It makes you want to go back to the beginning and read it again, knowing the end, just to appreciate the moments of joy Hercules had before the conspiracy took him.
And that's the power of the Urdu Afsanka. It's not just a story, it's a wound. It opens up a space in the reader's mind where they have to reconcile these two opposing forces, the love of the creator and the hunger of the consumer. Mustafa Sajjad Haider captures that tension perfectly. He doesn't give us a happy ending because life often doesn't give us one. He gives us the truth, which is much more valuable, even if it's harder to swallow.
The story of Hercules reminds us that the things we save often end up saving us, or at least they give us a sense of purpose until the world intervenes. It's a beautiful, heartbreaking tribute to the small lives that mean the world to us. If this story moved you, consider sharing it with someone who appreciates the deep emotional layers of a well-told tale.